Hi, folks. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining this Deepwatch webinar on the 2023 threat report that we've recently put out. This is going to dive into the insights that our ATI, or the Adversaries Tactics and Intelligence team, has uncovered. And we've got a great lineup for you today to dive in deep on what the threat landscape's looking at today. They'll talk about what they saw in 2022, and then what the observations and forecasts are for this year going forward. So let's get straight into it. We've got a great lineup here, followed by a lot of detail. So if you haven't received the threat report yet, I encourage you to download it. You can get the link in the chat window there too. If you have questions, I also encourage you to add those into the Q&A tab going forward. But this was a great report that we put out to give insight into the threat landscape that you are all facing today. And it's important for you to understand what we've seen in the past and what we think we're going to see in the future. So both Jared and Kyle will walk you through that today with some of their insights that they've found out working both on the technical adversary and tactics and intelligence side, as also from our customer side as well. So our first presenter is Jared Barton. He's a senior director of our ATI team, and he has a number of years of experience supporting the DoD and other commercial entities from a technology and a cybersecurity perspective. He's got a proven track record in network defense, pen testing, host-based security analysis, and threat intelligence, as you would imagine. He specializes in the development of programs for security intelligence, incident response, forensics, and even insider threats too. And he's well certified in many of the certifications that you see listed here that makes him an expert to talk to you today about the threat landscape that he and his team has uncovered in the last year or so. So that's Jared. The next person is Kyle Shaffer. He's our senior SOC manager. And Kyle is a cybersecurity leader with more than 10 years experience, working very closely with our customers in security analytics and security operations to help improve our customer security operations as we help detect and respond to threats that we see in our customers' environments. He's an authority on event analysis and correlation, SIM ingestion, best practices, and incident response. As you would imagine, as he's close to our customers, working closely with them to help them detect and respond to threats. And just like with Jared, he's got many certifications that make him an expert in many things in this alphabet soup of acronyms and certifications. So we're excited to share with you some of the observations from 2022, and also what we think might be happening going forward in 2023. But first, I'd like to turn it over to Jared to talk a little bit about what ATI team does here at Deepwatch and how they are helping our customers.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate that. Yes. So he introduced, my name's Jared Barton. I've been at Deepwatch for 4 years now. Let's see. So for ATI is a focused set of individuals primarily responsible for the intelligence and forensics and how we operationalize the information that those two programs end up observing in a customer environment or globally across the enterprise. What you're seeing here is just it's an image of how programs feed programs within ATI. If you think about, a threat intelligence lead that points a threat hunter in a direction, a threat hunter finds that lead, pulls that thread, it becomes something a little bit greater, requiring a more deeper forensic-based investigation. You have a threat response team who goes in there, does that forensic investigation. During that investigation, they're uncovering more information, more indicators and potentially not known to the public, who then reverse that, send it to a threat hunter. Hey, go, let's make sure we're threat hunting and looking for these new indicators, and then intelligence gets added to that, and lots of different outcomes like detections and things like that. But that's generally how these three programs feed each other in the ATI organization, with the overall mission is to find bad. So I think you can move to the next slide. So at Deepwatch, what types of services or what products do you get when you're an MDR customer the ATI organization supports? So from the intelligence perspective, we issue out customer advisories when there is a significant event that deals with the technology or anything that we want our customers to be aware of. We tell them, this is what we're aware of, and these are the types of things that we're doing in support of this advisory. Not just telling you, but what are we doing? We have weekly intelligence reports that go out. Again, these are hand-selected topics that have significant impact to the cyber community at large, a large deployment of a technology. So there's criteria in the weekly intelligence reports that go out to our customers. And then we have threat activity intelligence reports that deal with observed activity from a threat actor. And we have our own internal naming scheme for that. And so our BOLOs are how we share information between groups at Deepwatch. So our Be on the Lookout ends up being a lead that we are pushing into the analyst community, the threat hunter community, to make sure that they know, the community at Deepwatch, to make sure they know what we're looking for and why we're looking for them. And then, of course, we're here because of our annual intelligence report. Ed stated it's a lot of the observations over the last year, as well as what are we predicting or what are we forecasting may occur in the coming year. On our response side, the 24/7 response is primarily used as a retainer gap. So we know a lot of customers, a lot of folks have insurance. They have to have a retainer that's a part of that insurance program. But we've seen where there's a potentially a large gap between the time that they've declared an incident or we have an incident to the point that a retainer comes on site. So that 24, 72-hour gap, bad guys still taking actions. There's still evidence that needs to be collected, things that we need to do. So it doesn't just stop because they called a retainer. We're still in there doing what we need to do to contain the activity and then turn it over to the retainer after that. And you can read, I don't need to read every single one of these, but we do forensic collections. We are all FEMA ICS certified. So the incident command structure for the EOC things. And then of course we offer threat signal, which I may talk about later. And then on the threat research side, that's where we do all of our intelligence-based hunting, our detection research. We use breach attack simulation for a number of different things. And of course, we have a malware analysis capability. Next slide, Ed.
Great, thanks. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what you saw in 2022.
Sure. So when if you think about what are the trends that we see, what are those high impact areas? Certainly, I think I'll start at the bottom because identity is a big one, because depending on the types of identities that you compromise, the impact is significant. If you think about cloud challenges with, true, when I say true source, like true identity of what change was made, those are challenges. When you compromise an identity, the things that you can do and the visibility gaps that we have with that, those can be very impactful to organizations, their security posture, their business operations, et cetera. So I think, one of the bigger observations is around, business email compromise, just account compromise in general, and being able to use those credentials, use that access to further their attack tree, their attack chain. And then a fairly big one, so exploitation of critical vulnerabilities. When I think about that, you think about the attack of opportunity, and we have business. Every organization has business operations in which they have to have certain technologies. They have to have, and I'm going to try my best to stay away from, because this isn't about a vendor name or anything like that, but technology related. You have to have virtualization in some cases that's public facing. You have to have portals. As COVID changed the game. I wouldn't necessarily say it changed the threat landscape, but it changed the IT landscape, which enabled the easier access to some of these threat groups. But you have these technologies that are public facing. When they're public facing, they're completely open to anyone to touch those systems. So when there's a vulnerability in it, or a 0 day, just having to look at some of these externally facing technologies and portals and knowing your attack surface, that is a challenge for a lot of organizations. And we will continue to see over 50% of the declared incidents at Deepwatch for the customers, they were mapped back to some external device that was internet facing, that allowed unauthenticated remote code execution, or just had a vulnerability that was missing a patch, the wrong type of configuration. So these internet facing systems, you think about the analogy of the house, those are the doors and the windows to your business. And if you're not monitoring those things, if you're not closing those doors, and even if it's cracked for minutes, that's a long time when they're exposed to the internet and the amount of traffic that touches those internet facing systems on a minute by minute basis. So it only needs to be open for a small period of time for a threat actor to take advantage of. So those are big ones when it comes to the risks of having internet facing systems and being able to monitor those. And then it certainly wouldn't be a threat brief without talking about ransomware. While I know that we're hearing trends and reading reports that the payment may be going down as far as the organizations that end up paying because of government regulations and different things like that. And I will, in my experience, as though not every ransomware group is in it for the money or the cybercrime aspect. Some are just evil. Some just want to disrupt our lifestyle. They want to impact us to where our convenience, our way of life is impacted, and it may not have anything to do with money. So while how we are regulating the payments and the fact that the payment we may not pay as often, doesn't stop the fact that it will still continue to occur with the objective of just being evil and shutting down, areas of our way of life. So I wanted to pause because I wanted to make sure that Kyle was able to jump in. Kyle, anything from your observations and your experiences in squads that you'd like to share about the 2022 observations?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kyle Shaffer, Senior SOC Manager. One of my primary responsibilities is interfacing with the customers on a daily basis. Not only do I oversee a team, but I also work as a cybersecurity consultant for companies. And something I've noticed that's really interesting about the observations just overall in the landscape is I think we stack rank cybersecurity vulnerabilities and exploits and tactics in our head naturally, right? You hear ransomware, that goes to the top. You hear business email compromise, where does that go? Probably near the bottom, right? And we've seen that in the cybersecurity community with our customers just naturally. And so what's really interesting about that is because we do that almost naturally, we tend to downgrade the amount of effort we give into something happening. Let me give you a little example of a story, right? Business email compromise happens in a customer environment, right? It happens to a salesperson, so not an admin, right? So what happens there? The team, the customer automatically goes, okay, not an admin, we walk it down one, right? And so there's maybe a little bit less response there. And so one of my responsibilities is essentially saying, hey, some more could happen in that scenario, right? Just because it's not an admin doesn't mean there is some pivoting that could occur. What we end up finding a lot is that when a salesperson maybe gets compromised for a business email and they send out emails out to other organizations that look like phishing links or maybe malicious attachments, it's degrading that company's ability to make a sale. Who wants to make a sale with an organization that is selling software when you just got an email from them? That's a phishing link, right? You probably severed that sale. And so in our heads, we think ransomware, that's the worst case scenario, which oftentimes it is. But even things like one person's email getting compromised within your organization can still be catastrophic for your Q3, Q4 onwards goals when it comes from a sales perspective. And so something that I've observed there is in the realm of that, having to show, individuals that even things that can look at the surface level, like something that can be solved, it still could be detrimental to the customer environment.
And, and just to take that, just a recent event, again, staying away from names, but, we're talking about business email compromise and the identities associated to businesses. Well, now you have, threat actors that are modifying tactics a little bit, and they're monitoring for who gets employed to the next like where are these people going to go, and then once they get employment, and they pop their personal email accounts, who that's how the business is communicating with them for onboarding, for new hire, and they're compromising their personal email, and they're able to get into networks because of the onboarding emails in the process. So, there's a lot of, when you think account, and I that's why I said identity mainly, is you do have business account compromise, but you also have personal email account compromise. And once they have that, they're seeing those emails, for onboarding, how to access, what to do. I mean, if I'm seeing all that, I can easily go in there and masquerade as if I was that new hire, and again, cause damage or impact business operations. So, account compromise, I think it's been a trend, and it will continue to be a trend.
Very, very important for sure. Let's move on. We've got some more observations that we've identified in the report as well. Here are three more. Maybe Jared, go for it.
Yeah, so the top one there, as far as the search engine optimization poisoning, that's very malware related. There was an alert that fired that we researched and pulled together different pieces of this bootloader downloader, and it referenced a larger campaign. And to see, and I think being able to correlate and tie some of these other specific alerts into a larger campaign is something we'll end up observing more. Again, for the search engine optimization poison attack, it's forcing people into going to a particular area and downloading something. So that tactic as a whole, forcing people to go to, or convincing people to go through to a certain area to get something, and they end up bringing something bad down. I think we've seen a lot of those tactics used, and I think we'll continue to see a lot of that, where they're pointing you in a direction that you think you're getting something good, but you're in fact downloading something bad. We respond to some USB usage that led to the Raspberry Robin in several environments. USBs, they come and go as far as in and out on trends. It was popular, years ago. You had the spread of different types of malware via USB. We had one, popular control system related malware, but we've done a lot of security measures to lock the USB world down. So, but that can't happen everywhere. And certainly the business is still important, how you make money, if you have to have those available. But that's something that we saw, or we observed in 2022. And then anything dealing with cloud environments, think about how people gain access to certain systems, the use of RDP, SSH. There's different risky ports when you have those enabled when things are internet facing. So again, high risk ports and services in cloud environments, something that we observed a lot of, and that tends to be a target of exploitation for those cloud services. Kyle, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I really think you hit it in the head, or the nail on the head there earlier, with the COVID making a change just in our industry in general, right? You had so many companies that had to spin up remote services and work from home services on the dime. They had to pivot. And cloud engineering isn't a simple task. And so some of those things get flipped on, switches get flipped on. And you'd think after 2 years after that, that stuff would have already been discovered, right? But that's not the case. I think we all work in this industry. You always know that you have one responsibility, then you have another, then you have another. Some things tend to fall to the wayside sometimes. And so we still now running Shodan scams, are finding open ports, public facing vulnerabilities, et cetera, in customer environments, and trying to help and educate. This isn't a best practice. Well, this is a business need. Oh, okay. Can we find some middle ground here, right? Around that, for sure.
Yeah, with that former slide, when externally facing systems and being able to do some form of attack surface monitoring, attack surface profiling initially, it's very key. You have to know what you're advertising to the world as an opportunity, and you have to make sure you're constantly aware. You have some, there's changes in IT every single day. There's a CAB meeting at whatever time in the morning that you do that, and there's some change, and sometimes the changes go overlooked because there's a lot of those changes, and you flipped on a port that ends up being a high risk port on an external system. And, again, I can't stress the fact that while you may flip that light on and then maybe immediately try to flip that switch off, the automation that's running against those risky ports on those devices from internet folks that have access and are constantly scanning those environments. I mean, just that few seconds can lead to initial access, and then you'll have some serious business impact after that. So
very important points for sure. One of the things I was thinking about is the need for threat intelligence. And I think a lot of times the most important thing is like putting together the pieces of information to really help determine what the true threats are. And I think that's kind of the challenge in a lot of cases, with companies have so many control systems out there trying to get so many alerts coming into them, and then they don't really know what to start with. But can you, either one of you, kind of talk about the importance of threat intelligence and making sure that that is integrated well into their existing systems or their MDR providers, or anything else about that?
Yeah, I'll probably start off with this one, right? So a couple slides ago, we saw that ATI provides a lot of threat intelligence products and documents and just consumables for the NDR customers, right? Those aren't just for the customers, that's for my operational team as well. If I was to tell my analysts after work, go and do some threat research, right? They've already logged their 8 hours of work. Now they're going to spend another 3 hours a day combing through the massive amount of threat intel that there is out on the internet. It's just not a productive use of their time, right? What we're able to do at Deepwatch, because of the services that we have and what Jared ends up providing for the team, is my team now has curated, accurate threat intel. That's really the important part of threat intel, at least for my team, is you want accurate threat intel. You just don't want the wide and heavy. And I think that's something the customers also deal with and struggle with on the day-to-day. I get asked what our threat feeds are, how we're reviewing them, how that's working, how it's getting played into our alerts. And it's because these teams can't be massive teams with dedicated threat intelligence researchers and engineers to comb through this and determine what is accurate, what is stale, and what is pressing right now, ranking in criticality, et cetera. And so that's a really big concern from the customer standpoint, and also my staff.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. For me, when it comes to intelligence is analyzed information, and we have access to a lot of it. We tend to focus at Deepwatch on organic intelligence because we have access to all this information. I'm not saying it's not best practice to stand up a threat intel platform and ingest all these other sources of information from different vendors. I think that is just as effective as just antivirus on your system. That was something back in the day that, was an effective control. I think the last numbers I looked at, antivirus is, 30% effective. I feel like that's the same way when you're just ingesting other people's investigations into your platform and relying on that. When we have access to terabytes of information on a daily basis, why don't we analyze that? Why don't we get in there a little bit more? Why don't we dig a little bit deeper? Let's look at what we have access to. And that's been a big focus over the last few years, was the generation of our own organic intelligence that does feed new detections, that would feed a threat hunt activity, that would do a lot of different things to help a more intel driven stance. But it really has to start with building out the right tools and getting the right sets of information to be able to analyze that information, have our organic intelligence, do our forensic capabilities so that we can continue to collect organic intelligence and then operationalize that. We are actually protecting everybody. That anytime we have organic intelligence from an investigation from one customer, we operationalize every bit of that. So all of those indicators that we observe, we're not out there burning them immediately. We got to operationalize them. We got to use them for a little bit to help protect or detect more activity in other customer environments. So how we operationalize our intelligence is very, very key here at Deepwatch.
Yeah. And something just to touch on what Jared was talking about there is the organic intel then feeds into our systems, but it gives more of a picture than just your generic intel source would, right? IP is bad, and IP is related to X malware, Emotet, for example, is a very, it's vague, right? when we talk about organic intelligence, a lot of organic intelligence is accompanied with an investigation that someone has conducted, has documented, has a lot of surrounding, IOCs, IOAs around that. So then my team, if they see a detection, they're not just going to go out and look for, a needle in a haystack related to that. They're able to look back at a previous investigation, see the full story around why that was created as a detection, and then use that to leverage their detection in another customer environment. And that's a huge advantage to both speed and, an accuracy on our side because of that.
Yeah, spot on. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, these were some of the observations that the team has identified in the threat report. Let's move forward and talk a little bit more about what we think might be happening in the future or in 2023. So maybe one of you could start talking about the forecast of what you're seeing.
Yes, absolutely. I can start that. So certainly a significant increase in new information stealing malware. I think we've already seen that. There's several variants out there. They're just changing, modifying certain elements of that framework of the malware itself. But we're going to see new information stealing malware. I think that's certainly a no-brainer, and continuing to, that's an interesting one, as we store a lot of information in GitHub. We store a lot of information in different public areas, and continuing to target the source code of the repositories to continue to collect different information and operationalize that same information themselves. And then if I think about whenever I, was a red team type person and we're generating our tactics and the things we want to do, I'm also researching how once we conduct certain exercises, how am I being talked about in the news, and continue to monitor their own behaviors through how they're being reported in order to change different ways of them doing business. I said, burning indicators, that's a pretty, everyone's familiar with that topic. That's what we end up doing, is we end up submitting these indicators out there, and me as I'm monitoring VirusTotal, I'm monitoring all these areas where my indicators that I'm using could potentially be submitted, and then I'm going to change my tactic. And that's nothing new. I think they've been doing that for a while too, but you're going to continue to see how they research and analyze their own information to then evade or change tactics moving forward. So those are some good ones in my mind. Kyle, do you have any thoughts and feelings there?
Yeah, I think we're going to see an increase in some script kiddie-esque malware being derived from platforms like OpenAI and other, AI-based. I know the word is a hot topic right now. That's kind of a key word. Coming from AI-based platforms where you can spin up easy-to-go malware variations and run them against testing, and then find ones that don't get hit up. We're seeing, for example, people using things like Gmail, right? They're simply just taking AI-driven malware, attaching it to Gmail emails, sending it to another one, and seeing what's getting blocked by internal security platforms. What doesn't get through, that's your new payload, right? That's not an overly complex topic. It's not difficult to do. And so people that aren't overly complex are going to be able to utilize that in a way to spread malware more efficiently. So we're getting hit from two sides of the coin, right? Where we see more advanced attacks start occurring. And then we also see this more script kiddie-esque, I'm getting new to the industry, or I want to try this out. Let me throw some of this into an AI algorithm, have it pop out something and throw it towards a business way. So I think we're seeing kind of both sides of the spectrum there in 2023. And so we have to be prepared for both.
I think along that line, Kyle, real quick, if I could jump in, if you think about the earlier topic, we talked about the observations of ransomware. It used to be you could detect ransomware or a phishing attack based on how well or unwell the email was written, right? Now they can use generative AI tools like ChatGPT to write really solid, well-written phishing attack emails or ransomware emails to really fool people into clicking on bad links. And I think we'll only see more and more of that as well going forward.
Yeah, I think I kind of have a saying, time is money and money is time, right? So if you're taking the time to craft the perfect email to send out to a group of people that wasn't successful, that's time wasted. If you're able to take an algorithm and create 500 company emails that look exactly the same and then ship them out even quicker, the efficiency on that goes up, and then therefore your ability to spread goes up.
Yeah, that is a good call out on the use of, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of different social media platforms around, AI, referencing old school movies, how do we contain, this thing. I wouldn't say it necessarily is a threat. I think it's an opportunity for a lot of businesses, but certainly like any opportunity can be abused. And the idea behind the simplicity of taking even AI generating new types of malware frameworks, I think that is certainly something we will 100% see in the future.
Yep, for sure, for sure. I mean, they're going to use as any tool they can. The adversaries will use any tool they can to improve their success rate, for sure, for sure. Okay, let's talk about some more what we might see in 2023 going forward. Some other things here.
Yeah, so I mentioned several of these, the exploitation of vulnerabilities, public facing, internet facing systems. I mean, that again, 50% of the investigations that we go to map to those. You're not going to stop seeing that. Patch your system has been a recommendation for, I couldn't even tell you how many years that. And, we can't always do that. It's not always the easiest job to do for whatever reason, business operations reasons, the patch isn't available. Like there's things. So certainly the exploitation of vulnerabilities that are on systems that are public facing will continue to be something that we see as the initial access into an environment. And then, all types of different things would happen from there on out. And, the use, when we talk about gaining that initial access and social engineering, using container file types, they're going to continue to use these types of file types in their campaigns and their exercises to continue to get people to open these up, and then run bad code on whatever system they were targeting. And then I again mentioned this. And when we were talking about attack surface profiling and the business operations, and that we have, portals to allow folks that are out there remote to, if they're not VPN in, maybe there's portal access from the outside and it's not multi-factor, just targeting these login portals and trying to find, issues, weaknesses, bugs behind that so they can come in an unauthenticated way and potentially use some remote code execution techniques to gain access from those portals and systems that are externally facing. Kyle, feel free, weigh in, sir.
No, I think that's great. I don't think we're going to see any decline, at least in some of these identified forecast elements, right? There's not going to be much change in terms of in zipped and compressed files being sent over phishing. That's still going to be an uptick like it has been, over the past 10 years. I think new domains are being spun up that are going to be really interesting. I think we all just read that report on the .zip domain getting spun up. That's something now that you can register a site as, which will be kind of an interesting throw in the mix there in terms of the new naming conventions for domains. And just overall, we're seeing a lot of, again, we kind of go back to the AI side of the house where you have, new, dynamically generated algorithm for domain names, which are being able to bypass security systems. So now you have to have an AI model ingesting data that was created by an AI model. So we're going back and forth in terms of like almost a loop in that security aspect. But no, I think this is all on the horizon for sure.
You guys mentioned something in the report around different sectors or industries that might be more vulnerable to attacks. Can you highlight any of the industries that you did see in the report that may be more prone to attacks or targeting?
Certainly there's, sorry, this is a sensitive topic, but I will share. So, I mean, certainly there are industries in which would need to focus on something. When I think of that though, and I think of whether you're an IT-based industry or you're an OT-based industry. So an operational technology environment versus an IT, control system versus business IT operations. So when you think about, what do I need to focus on if I am a hospital versus a bank? Well, look at the ransomware, you look at the attacks of opportunities, your perimeter, your ASP in a bank looks very much the same as an ASP that's a hospital, because these are technologies that you have, virtualization, portals, all these things we're talking about. That's not industry specific, that's IT specific. If you are networking in some fashion, you have to have these technologies. If you have a remote workforce, you have to have these technologies. So I think it's a bit different though, if you're talking about, well, I have a business operations, I have an IT organization, or I have an IT enterprise, and I have an OT. Well, that OT is a lot different. Now there's some embedded, there's Windows systems that are HMIs, but there's a lot of other very, OT specific, PLCs and things like that that is a different story. A PLC exploit it's not going to apply at all in an IT infrastructure. So, I mean, I know there's been a lot of the scientific and the research industry, because that's something of interest. When I think about what do I need, what do I want to say to organizations that are, I just want to know about what impacts my industry. Well, if you have IT systems, it's everything, unless it's talking specifically about some vulnerability in a PLC or some very specific OT device. So I think at Deepwatch we have a lot of conversations we need to focus on, of the opportunities that you have, that you're advertising, and less about, well, is, Conti targeting me versus Black Bossa versus, this new threat. If you look at what they're doing, they're sending emails. We all have email systems, so you're a target. So once they get in, they're using PowerShell, they're using WMI. I mean, we all have Windows systems. So the idea behind the industry specific, I think we should focus more on the attacks of opportunity and less about if it applies to one industry or the other. If you think of some of those bigger breaches, the Target from way back in the day, it was an HVAC system that popped Target. So that had nothing to do with their industry. They're using trust, they're using identities, they're using the methods to get into other organizations. So in the report, I'm pretty sure it states, something around the scientific industry, just because of research and development, things like that. But if you have an IT system and you do business operations with networking devices, and you have email, and you have to worry about the same things. All of us have to worry about those things. So I don't know, Kyle, if you want to jump in there, share your thoughts. Those are just mine.
It's a question I get all the time. I probably get this question about monthly, right? Is essentially am I more at risk because I am, I'm in the financial industry than I would be if I was in the healthcare industry, et cetera, et cetera. I think Jared really hits on the head that with the attacks that we're seeing, right? When you're blasting out phishing emails, you're blasting out phishing emails, and whoever hits it, right? We're looking for low-hanging fruit. We're not necessarily only targeting one subset of organization. That's not to say that there aren't, nation state or APTs that do target specific industries for a specific reason, but on the mass, we see it start to balance out, right? Because you have a combination of the two. And then I'd say, in addition to that, you have supply chain attacks, which we're seeing, on a rise, which is the same thing. It's the industries that are using the vendor software and not necessarily the industry itself. If we have like the 3CX phones, right? Anyone could be using a web soft phone, right? That's not specific only to the business or retail industry, although it happened to be a little bit more affected towards the business and retail industry. Anyone could be using that application and then be affected by that. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, again, I understand that there are custom applications, when you're in healthcare, the use of Epic has there's applications, there's Swift when you're in the bank. I get that. But as far as how they are getting inside, they're all getting inside in a very similar way. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It may be, what is their objective once they're in? Do they want to be criminals? They just want to be evil, right? And so that, but I think we have to worry more about the what are we broadcasting as an opportunity for someone to take advantage of. Also, I stress this a lot too. How often are we exercising our incident response plans? And I mean, organizations, we exercise ours on a daily basis because we are investigating all the time. But for an organization that isn't in an MDR, doesn't have that that, we're solving a lot of the intel, using organic intel, operationalizing intel to help Deepwatch customers. But if you're not a Deepwatch customer, how often are you testing that plan? Because it doesn't matter if it's Jared, Kyle, Ed, the name of the attacker isn't really what matters. My incident response plan doesn't change because it's Jared versus Kyle versus Ed, which is, you use that as in like different threat actors. Like that doesn't matter to me. What matters is how we respond, how do we exercise the response plan. And a great framework, when I mentioned the FEMA incident command structure, that was actually designed to handle natural disasters, but you could apply cyber to that as well. And that's the type of thinking, is you have to have a framework that can take on anything, and you're still responding the same way. So it doesn't matter what attacker that is, we are still exercising the same way of managing that incident. And I think that that's critical too, is the exercising of your incident response plan and making sure you have the right communications, and all the people involved know they're involved, and you exercise that frequently.
Yeah, exercising the incident response plan is absolutely critical. The first 24 hours after you identify the incident are huge. And if you're spending the time trying to figure out how you're going to spin up the resources, I've worked with several clients that have not, didn't even have tabletops set up and didn't have an incident response plan completely set up. So then if something was to happen, right, they would spend the first 4 hours figuring out what the plan was, and they wouldn't be building the plan around who it was that attacked them, right? It would just be simply, what do we do in this situation, right?
Yes. Exactly.
It doesn't, it's irrelevant. I mean, not necessarily irrelevant. I guess the level of complexity plays some part into the incident response, right? In terms of if you're dealing with who you're dealing with and how embedded they are in your system. But regardless, most incident response plans at least start off the exact same, right? So definitely a good point.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's completely irrelevant that it's this threat actor versus that threat actor, because there are, there's legal things. Where's the attack? Where's the origin of the attack? How can you negotiate with them, if at all? Like, there are certain legal things involved if your focus is on the origin, but how accurate is the origin of that attack with the way we're able to masquerade or, proxy and be anonymous in some way, like that attribution is a struggle. And are we going to spend all of our time on the left side of that looking at attribution, or should we just focus on how do we recover because this just happened? And I feel like that's what we need to focus on more, is how do we recover once this happens? So sorry,
right, or plug the hole. I oftentimes see people trying to point the finger at who it was before they've even plugged the hole of how they got in, right?
Yeah.
Resource management there is very big. Hey, Ed, you might be muted.
Sorry. Yeah, very critical. Having a plan and that's well rehearsed, everybody knows about it, is you're that much farther ahead if you don't have one, for sure. Hey, one other question that we have is around threat intelligence. And in the report, we talk a lot about threat intelligence, but how can customers leverage or utilize threat intelligence to improve their security operations? Do you guys have any sense for what that would look like, or how customers might be using that today?
I mean, I think we covered a little bit of that before, but again, what intelligence are you trying to take action on? And I think the importance of integrating intelligence comes from how you generate your own organic intelligence. Once you have organic intelligence and you have investigative data, and you're learning a lot about how where are your gaps, where you actually may need to invest technologies. A lot of those get answered during, investigation. So you have a team of people investigate and collect, the information around your own business unit or business units and your organization as a whole. Like you can operationalize that into detections, into protection mechanisms, invest your security, dollars into a technology that, helps cover from a detect and response perspective. So yeah, I mean, I think it's about what intel are you using to make decisions based off of, there's business intel and there's tactical, threat intel. So threat intel and the organic side of that should help drive, what tools you need to do a better job there, what, again, what investments you'd make from a technology perspective to help on the protection side. And then of course, where you cannot protect, you must be able to detect and respond, and how you use those dollars for that as well.
Yeah, I think asking questions, either to, if you're a customer Deepwatch, asking Deepwatch questions. If you have a different provider, asking them. If you're an in-house shop, asking your security team how they're leveraging threat intel now, and are you picking up on something? Take an artifact, take Quackbot, right? And take some IOAs from Quackbot and say, hey, are this something you guys detect on? Are we able to detect on this? Why are we able to? Are we not able to? What are we leveraging? How is this being used? Those questions start to spur the conversation around how we're investigating and using threat intelligence. And it might also paint a bigger picture into if you are, if you aren't, why you're not. Also running, just in general, not necessarily also Deepwatch, but just in general, you should test your security tools. I don't think people test their security tools enough, and they don't test their threat intel enough. If you have an application or an IOA or IOC that is being ingested in the threat intelligence sources, and you're testing it and it's not hitting, it's not popping, what are the reasons around that, right? Collaboration is so big in the threat intelligence community, not only with sharing threat intelligence, but making sure it's implemented correctly and it's working correctly. You want to make sure that that's being spot checked on a regular basis, just to make sure that things are running smoothly, like you would with anything else.
Yeah, 100% accurate. And I think another thing, being a part of a working group, an ISAC, I think to Kyle's point, if we shared more and collaborated more, I think that in a sense is organically talking about intelligence. I think we'd be able to learn more as well. I'm not saying that I don't think we do an amazing job of it now. I think everyone tries to keep intel hush hush, and there are very legitimate reasons for that. I do understand, but as far as integrating intelligence, it gets to me like, well, what intelligence are we collecting, and how do you operationalize that? Because different levels of intelligence get operationalized differently. But if we also came together more as a group and we, shared a little bit more, shared our experiences, shared the bad. I mean, that's what we have to learn from. It's okay that something bad occurred. How did we learn from it? What investments did we make to make sure that doesn't happen again? And sharing what we've learned with the community. That way, again, your mistake could be someone else's $1 million save. And to share more, I think we just don't do enough of it. I'm not saying we don't do any, but there's groups you can go to, again, ISACs and working groups that will share threat intel to help with some of your strategic decisions and your tactical decisions as well.
Yeah, I think that's you could put that on the back of a t-shirt. I think that's our audio clip there. Is your mistake could be someone else's $1 million save. There we got our clip.
There you go, Kyle. I like it. Well, I want t-shirts made now. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, the intelligence and the collaboration between the industry is critical. And I think there's always room for improvement around that for sure, as it relates to collaboration with the other security companies and industry folks that need to share that information for the whole being better than what it is today, for sure.
Yeah. Is there any other questions, Ed?
Let me check here. We're getting close to the end here. We do have one question. Let's move it over here. Threat actors groups have always been prevalent due to monetary incentive as a bad actor, to be a bad actor, of course. With global events in 2023, including the war in Europe between Ukraine and Russia, are nation state campaigns now being observed at a higher volume?
It feels like when I talk about intel, I'm talking about observations at Deepwatch. So I want to be clear about that first. And while there was never a drastic uptick in, attacks, it felt like because there was that conflict, the conflict was absorbing a lot of threat activity within the conflict, and things were oddly a bit quieter in the community. It's again using the data that we have. So I'm not we weren't seeing anything that was a crazy uptick because of that campaign, because I think that campaign was absorbing a lot of resources from threat actors on different sides of the fence there, doing what they do. So Kyle, again, if you've read something different, observed something different, feel free to chime in, but I didn't see any odd, significant increase in attacks from groups and the Deepwatch customer base.
No, not that. And also, I think maybe sometimes things get quickly and maybe wrongly attributed to those groups because of the heightened awareness to it. I can give a quick just story of something that happened for, I think, all customers across the base, because this was a popular EDR tool, but at Deepwatch, a tool that's leveraged. There was an update at about 1 o'clock in the morning for this popular EDR tool. We didn't know there was an update at the time. All we had were 100 plus Deepwatch customers automatically flagged for Mimikatz detection. So, I'm sitting on my computer, probably studying or maybe playing a game of League of Legends or something, right? And I get a phone call from one of my best analysts. I pick up the call. I know if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, something's going on. And he goes, "Hey, Mimikatz is firing all over the place. I think it's nation state. They're in all these customers. You got to hop on right now." So as you can imagine, I hopped on real fast. We brought on our EDR specialists, and we were able to identify that this was an update, and that for Google Chrome. And Google Chrome has password updates. It was an update to password, which then got flagged by the EDR tool as Mimikatz, right? Nothing that customers ever want to see, right? And so all those customers were awake. We were all awake. And this happened because Google Chrome auto-updated all these customer environments all at the same time. But quickly, we saw in Reddit threads, we saw even my own analyst, right, go, "Hey, 100 customers at the same time. This has to be nation state. There's nothing else that could be this big. This has to be an APT, maybe from one of the two countries." And then afterwards, we were able to identify that it was actually an update, calm everybody down. And two takeaways from that. One, I think, is because of the heightened awareness, we're quite quick maybe to make just general assumptions. Not that that's, it helps kind of spur the mood. But secondly, at an MDR, an MSSP especially, each of those 100 customers was siloed. To them, at 1 o'clock in the morning, that was a Mimikatz detection. And all they knew was that Mimikatz they thought was happening inside their environments, and they were spinning up full IRs, 100 potential full IRs. From our standpoint, what we saw was there's so many customers getting popped at the same time. It really could only be two things: unlikely nation state, more likely misconfiguration. And while we were able to identify that fast, those miscommunication or misconfiguration, we could spread that out to the customers, kind of calm them down. And then they were, very thankful for that shared intelligence that we're able to see at our side. And that's just the kind of thing that I've noticed, at least from both sides, the cybersecurity community and also the customer community, is that because of what's happening, in a war, that you kind of start to think, well, it's got to be one of those two places.
Yeah, I mean, collateral damage is a real thing, and I understand. We took that serious. To Kyle's point around heightened awareness, we were pretty sensitive on our feet, around here during those things, and we were trying to quickly correlate different things to ensure that, it wasn't something bigger, at that time. So I can appreciate the paranoia every once in a while.
Yeah, very good. Very good. One more question that popped in here. Do you act upon or investigate based on MITRE or TTPs over indicators?
So it depends on the indicators. So that's a great question. When I think of, you have organic intelligence is something that we act upon more so than on MITRE mapped like techniques like that. We want, again, the organic thing is about, we need to observe. When I think of someone else's investigation, I wasn't there. I didn't observe it. I don't know. Was it analyzed appropriately? Can I have access to the information so that we can analyze it and make our, form our own opinions and conclusions? So our organic intelligence is something. So when you say indicators, I act upon the indicators that are organic from the investigations that the ATI folks look at over any MITRE or TTP. But, we do map those indicators to techniques being used or behaviors being used, and we may threat hunt based off of a behavior and not necessarily always over a specific indicator. If it's a very hot indicator, like we do some quick research and the indicator is not public knowledge, we will take that indicator and run that across everywhere and threat hunt for days on that thing if we have to, just to pull the right threads. I hope I answered that question the right way. Kyle, did you want to add to that?
I mean, a not shameless plug for TPV, I'd probably throw in there, right? At least from this side of the house, where yes, from IOCs, IOAs, map to MITRE tactics and techniques. through our proprietary correlation, TPV, threat probability value, we are able to take certain pieces of the attack flow, put them together into a story, and then we do take some sort of action on that, mostly investigation from what we identify there. But that's a little bit separate to the organic intel.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we don't, I want to make sure we act upon observed behaviors and validated information. So, if that's in the form of some behavior versus an actual atomic indication, we would act upon either one. Again, I think it's more about the validation, but when I read, certainly we do some of our hypothesis-based hunting based off of MITRE techniques. Well, that's interesting technique. How would that be applied? Let me think about that. Let me think about how that might work. And then we form some sort of a threat hunt. But depending on the type of indicator, I may react quicker or differently over those indicators. Hopefully I answered that right.
Yeah, it's very important to put all the pieces together for sure. And looking at those indicators will help you do that for sure. There are no more questions, guys. Any final words you want to share before we close out this session?
I just, appreciate the attendance, intelligence, just the IC, the intelligence community as a whole, I think, is a very important aspect. Your ability to collect information and analyze it to make business decisions, again, make those strategic decisions and make tactical decisions are important. If you ever needed help with that, obviously you could reach out. Yeah, I appreciate everybody. Kyle, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, just again, appreciate all the attendees and maybe some of the future watchers when this thing gets posted from recording posting. This isn't a job, it's a career, right? Cybersecurity is a lifestyle. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop at 5, right? We have to keep developing, we have to keep getting better, we have to keep getting involved in things like this in order to stay above and in front of the threat landscape as best as we can. You can get outdated really fast, and you can fall behind really fast. So the participation from people, from things like this, from our customers that are constantly involved in wanting to better their cybersecurity practices and their platforms. I appreciate it. Jared appreciates it. Deepwatch appreciates it. And it's good to see that the back and forth.
Great. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Kyle. You guys provided some great insights, talked a lot about what you saw last year, what the future holds for all of us in cybersecurity. So much appreciated. And much appreciated to all the audience folks who joined today. Thank you very much. I wish you the best. If you have any questions about MDR or Deepwatch or security in general, please reach out to us. You can contact us via our website under the contact page. So we'll close it off there. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.